In today's session, we cover the new engineering contracts. So the new engineering contracts are endorsed for the construction industry, where they are used mostly for public sector contracting, right? So if government wants to go into a contract, they in most cases will use the NEC contract, right? It's an international contract, it's global, right? It has simple language, so it's easy for most people to understand the language that is written within the NEC, right? We go through each of the contracts in choosing which contract will go for which scope. We will look into the engineering construction contract, right? So the engineering and construction contract, it's mainly used for your main works, right? Where either you have a design element, either you have a construction or engineering element, you go for your ECC. You also have an ECC short contract where you can use it for contracts that are more simpler or that are straightforward, right? It's still engineering, but it's more straightforward. It's not as complicated. Then you can go for the ECC short contract, right? And then you have the ECC subcontract. That one, it's mostly advised to say, if you're going to have a subcontractor, have a back-to-back contract, right? So that you don't have to go and redo all the conditions that are already existing. So if from the client you have the conditions that have already been outlined and agreed, you just have a back-to-back contract with the subcontractor. Then you sign the ECC subcontract with the subcontractor, right? Where it carries the same conditions. You amend where it's necessary only to amend, but mostly you will keep the conditions similar or the same. Hence, it will be a back-to-back, right? And then we come to the professional services contract, right? The professional services contract is the one that we use to appoint a supplier. So this will be a professional. It can be an attorney, it can be an advocate, it can be an architect, it can be a quality inspector, it can be a specialist in whichever field. If you are appointing someone based on their professional status, you will use the professional services contract. So now in the NEC 4, they also have the professional services short contract, right? So for those simple small projects or simple and small requirements, you can choose to use the professional services contract, which is the short contract instead of the main PSC contract that we are aware of, right? The next contract is the term service contract, right? In the term service contract, we use it to appoint a supplier, but it's mainly if you're appointing a supplier for a period of time, right? It can be 6 months, can be a year, can be 2 years, right? There is a certain period of time. So normally the term services contract, we use it to provide a service, right? We use it for maintenance, right? Where you either need something to be repaired, or you need something to be refurbished, or you need something to be maintained, right? You are not re-engineering, you are not reconstructing, you are maintaining, right? So it's mostly for those general repetitive works, like for example, your outages. In some of your outages, for your repetitive general work, you will use a term service contract, right? For your security company that's guarding your construction site, you will use a term service contract, right? For your catering company that will be in your canteen or that will facilitating your catering service, or your cleaning company that will be giving you cleaning service. We use term service contract, right? It's general in nature, right? And then we move into the supply contract. Now, the supply contract, we use it for providing space, for purchasing space, for purchasing goods, right? We need to manufacture a new transformer somewhere overseas, we use a supply contract. We need to get space somewhere locally, we use a supply contract. So in this specific one, it can be either just a straightforward supply of that goods, right? But you can also include services, but it must be services which are in relation to the goods, right? So let's say, for example, we were buying a generator overseas, or we were buying a generator here local, right? And then we say, okay, once we are getting the generator, but we need you to design it. The services for design will be included in the supply contract, right? And then we say, okay, we are buying this generator, but we need you to train our staff on how to use this generator, right? So it means the service for training will be included within your supply contract. And then we say, okay, we are buying this generator from you. Now, we need you to come and supervise the contractor, or to come and supervise the team that will be installing this generator. So we are buying it from you, you are supplying it to us, but we need you as the person who has designed it and as the person who has manufactured it to come and oversee the commissioning of it, or to come and oversee if the construction is being done correctly, right? So the service of that supervision element, or the commission, where you come and supervise the commission, or you come and do the commission yourself. Maybe we've bought it from you, it was delivered, someone else will construct it, and then we bring you in to say, okay, you can come and do commissioning, for example, right? So the supply contract has the part where we are getting the goods, right? But it also has the elements to say, should there be a service that is required in relation to the goods that we are getting, you can specify the service within the supply contract, right? And then we contract for it as such. So that's the supply contract. Now, within NEC, you also have your adjudication contract. Normally, your adjudication contract, you sign it as and when there's a dispute, right? Because an adjudicator, it's someone who comes to hear what the dispute is, if there is a dispute between the parties, right? So normally when you enter into a contract, it will tell you to say whether there's already a list of adjudicators that have been pre-approved, that should there be a dispute, these are the people we choose from, right? Or the adjudicator will be appointed as and when there's a dispute, depending on the merits of the dispute, depending on the experience of the adjudicator, right? So there is an NEC adjudicators contract that mainly addresses the issues of dispute. So he will then issue a decision at the end after hearing both sides to say what decision at the end he comes with, right? So the adjudicator within the same contract, you can say he's playing or she's playing the role that the court would have done, right? But we know that going to the courts, it's more time consuming and in the spirit of mutual trust and cooperation, and in the spirit of getting things moving, or projects where we don't get stuck, and the work doesn't get finished within your same NEC contract, there will always be a element which can be brought in under adjudication, which should be able to resolve any of the issues quickly. So that is brought in through the new engineering contract, which is the adjudicator's contract, right? One of the other contracts, it's the framework contract, but we will not go into it, right? The most widely used contract is your ECC, it's your professional service, it's your term service, it's your supply contract, it's the adjudicator's contract, right? So we need to know what they are, which scope we use them for, right? Now we can move into how we allocate risk, right? So now we've decided to say, okay, we are going with which type of contract that we've identified. Now we need to come to the part where we say, what option, which main option do we choose, right? So if we go for option A is your priced contract with activity schedule. And then option B is your priced contract with bill of quantities, right? But what I want you to note is the fact that we've went for a priced contract with activity schedule, or we've went for a priced contract with bill of quantity, does not mean that the price, if let's say the price was 1 million, it does not mean that we will end or finish the contract with it as 1 million. Because remember, we contract for the works, we contract for the scope as it is identified at that point, right? Which means, should there be any additions in the scope, should there be any changes in the scope, compensation events, claims, disputes, that 1 million, which was supposed to be a scope which is risk free, right, is no longer risk free, because you will need to pay the additional compensation events, you will need to pay the additional claims, and then you will need to pay should there have been any disputes, right? So whether you've chosen a price contract A with activity schedule or option B, it goes back to your scope of work. How confident are we on the scope? Any changes in the scope, we are going to pay more, right? Fine. So, and then we move into the next element, which is the target contract, option C, which is the target contract with activity schedule, or option D, which deals with target contract with bill of quantities. So now on this two options, option C and option D, this one we use it to share the risk. The risk is shared between the employer and the contractor, right? We have a target to say our target is to complete this within 1 million, right? But we are more in a collaborative, and this is where you will get incentives for finishing earlier. This is where you will have certain performance which benefits both parties. So this one, it's risk sharing between the two, right? And then we move into option E. Option E is a cost reimbursable. And then we have option F, which is a management contract. So these two, option E and option F, the employer or the client takes most of the risk, right? So these two are normally not done generally, right? most that you will find it's either A or B, right? For you to go with F, or for you to go with option E, which is cost reimbursable, it must be maximum benefit for the employer, because in this two, the employer is the one that carries most of the risk. So this one is normally used where it's a long-term beneficial relationship, where maybe the parties, the management are in a partnering for long-term designs or long-term improvements or long-term. This one, it's mostly where you have a relationship, not just for now, but years to come. And then we come into the last session, which deals with your secondary options, right? In the secondary option, you will have your X clauses, like your X1, which speaks to priced adjustment for inflation. This one you will have if a contract runs a year or more, there will be CPA, which means X1 will apply, right? If a contract is less than a year, there will be no CPA, which means you will not have X1, right? And then where a contract is done both locally, but there's a portion that is also included for overseas, you will have your multi-currency. And then, like I said earlier, in most of the contracts, you will have your changes in law clause, because each and every contract, should the law change, it will also need to change, right? And then you will have whichever secondary option that is deemed necessary to allocate the risk or to mitigate the risk will be brought in, right? If we need a performance, we will bring it in. If we need to deal with the liability, we'll bring it in. If we need to keep some of the money to make sure that the work finishes, will bring in retention, right? If we need to make sure time is of the urgency, we need to deal with delay damages, we'll bring in the element that deals with delay damages, right? If this is as and when required type of a contract, we will bring in the X clause that speaks to task orders, right? To say you have a 3-year contract, but you only come as and when you are required, which means you only come as and when we give you a task order. When there's an outage, we give you a task order for the 2 weeks. You come, you work for the 2 weeks, you are done, right? And then the next time we require the service again, we give you another task order. So it means on the secondary option for that specific one, we will bring in the X clause, which deals with task order, right? If this is a contract where we need to manage your performance, we'll bring in the KPI, where it speaks to key performance indicators, right? Where we'll need to identify to say, for us to say you've done maintenance, these are the KPIs in place, and, right? So the secondary options, we don't just say we choose all of them, right? We only choose the secondary options that are brought in to address a certain risk, right? And then normally your Z clauses are specific to that government department, right? Where based on their experience in the past, they would have included additional clauses over and above the clauses that NEC would have prepared. They will include additional clauses to say, these are the Z clauses, right? And generally, the Z clauses, you will bring them as they are for your specific company, right? So this deals with secondary clauses. That concludes our lesson for today. I hope you have learned something. I hope you are taking something in this series that we are currently running. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you in the next video.